Welcome to a special edition of the Smart Driving Cars podcast. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us. This edition is sponsored by the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. For more information, head to motoetf.com. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with the Faculty Chair of Autonomous Vehicle Engineering at Princeton University, Alain Kornhauser. Good morning, Alain.
Hey, good morning, Fred.
And joining us is Clifford Winston, Senior Fellow in Economic Studies at the Brookings Institution, co-author of Autonomous Vehicles, The Road to Economic Growth, and author of the forthcoming book, Gaining Ground, Markets Helping Government. Thanks for joining us, Cliff.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you, Cliff.
Well, Alain, with the news of the crash this week outside of Houston involving a Tesla Model S that killed two people, 69-year-old Everett Talbot and 59-year-old Dr. William Varner, it was important to come on and talk about the impact and some of the issues here.
Yes, I think we need to discuss it a little bit. This is, I think, one of the big ones we've had. We've had a few big ones in the past. The Jonathan Brown one in Florida, 4 years back now, or we should look at the date, and then a couple years ago, Alain in Arizona. I mean, these are major points of news and of reflection on what it is that we're doing, how we're doing it, and this, I guess, is going to be another one.
Well, the investigation is ongoing. We'll preface everything by saying that first, and there may be information that comes out that we're not aware of at this point. But according to authorities, neither of the two men who were in the vehicle was driving at the time it collided with a tree and caught fire. One was in the passenger seat, one in the back seat. And while initial reports said it took 4 hours to put out the fire, car and driver is quoting the fire chief as saying the initial fireball was contained in a matter of minutes, but there were small flare-ups that took longer to put out. And Elon Musk said this week that data logs show that autopilot was not enabled in the car, and it did not have full self-driving, what he calls full self-driving. So there's a lot still that we don't know. I guess authorities are trying to get all of that data for their investigation. Cliff, let's bring you in here. You have some initial thoughts and had an initial response to this as well.
Yeah, sure. I think that this crash, which was totally predictable, I mentioned this in my book, a footnote in my book, that this was inevitably going to happen, motivates, I think, two concerns with what's going on with the AV world. The first is that something that Musk in particular needs to appreciate, but I think everybody, is that safety is an externality for the industry. So let me make an obvious point. If American Airlines gets in a crash, United does not then run an ad the next day and say, "Fly us, we're safe," right? That doesn't happen.
And that doesn't happen.
I worked in broadcasting for a long time, and I know whenever there's a crash, all commercials related to the industry and travel get canceled.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, and that's what you call an externality.
Right.
When one firm does something, it really affects the others. And so this is a classic example of that. Tesla's involved with an AV feature, let's say. Whether it was working or not, will be decided later. But it obviously is bad for the whole industry because now we get the uproar again about AVs and are they safe? All right. So, that is harmful. And Musk just does not seem to care that, he's hurting the whole cause. Now, Musk does have a response to this, and I'm sure we're going to hear it if we haven't already. And that is, well, the fact that Tesla has this feature is potentially useful because you get the experiment of seeing, okay, here is Tesla with autonomous technology. Are those, despite even this crash, safer than cars with non-autonomous technology? Okay, now that may even be a true statement. But this is just not the time to run that experiment as we're trying to get AVs adopted, okay? that there is a time maybe to make that point, but this isn't the time to do it. Quickly, second point is it again points to the lack of a federal champion for autonomous vehicles. This is, to me, the most frustrating thing. Policymakers should be 110% behind this, trying to get these things adopted safely and set up the appropriate federal safety standard, all right, which they're going to need one way or the other. NHTSA or Congress or somebody is going to have to say, here are the standards that these cars have to meet to be adopted. They have not done that. Now, a lot of people say, well, Tesla was not breaking the law by driving around even with the autonomous feature, and that is true. But that is simply because policymakers have not engaged and intervened and said, look, we are now going to set the standard so Tesla cannot do this and have the accident that is now causing concerns. But we just do not have anybody. One request, I would love to have a podcast and love to be invited, where you invite Secretary Buttigieg, get him on, and I would like to ask him some basic questions. Why aren't you championing this technology?
Mayor Pete, Secretary Pete, whatever we want to call him.
Yeah, hey,
you're invited.
Cliff, I want to do that one too. And of course, I agree with, I really agree with you. I've said for, I think, some time that this technology is potentially so good that it probably deserves a separate mode. It deserves it. It's not an asterisk on conventional roadways. It's not, we have modal administrations that deal with railroads and pipelines and airplanes and even trucks. And this deserves it. Here we are trying to deal with asterisks on top of it. It's like, baseball, record books. There's a drug era and there's a what era and there's a spitball era and whatever. And they try to this is not just a spitball on a pitch. This is potentially fundamentally changing both the economy, the way we get around, and so on. This is bigger than transit. Transit only serves 1% of the person trips, and it has its own administration. Okay, I mean, cut it out. It's in the niche, yet it has its own administration, and these things have the potential of becoming much more than a niche.
Well, the important thing also, again, on the policy side is the social issues. We would not be having the confrontations between police and motorists with autonomous vehicles. It's so obvious. I mean, this is the kind of thing, if you want to make some immediate progress on police violence, get autonomous vehicles out there.
Yeah, right? you won't have any broken taillights, right? Because the thing's going to come in, they're going to know, they're going to fix it. It's a responsible and probably a financially successful entity who's going to fix its taillights. I mean, the reason why there's a broken taillight that somebody has to pull somebody over is they're too poor to fix it. And so they get a ticket over here in Hamilton, don't pay it, come to Princeton, get another ticket, get pulled over. Oh my goodness, there's now a warrant for your arrest. And now you go to jail. I mean, how do you get out from under this stuff?
Go to jail.
Let's not go there. Absolutely. I mean, yes, Cliff, you opened up a Pandora's box on that one.
Well, let me add the other one, and that's COVID. I mean, we are now concerned there are going to be other pandemics. We know autonomous vehicles are very helpful in preserving economic life and at the same time as facilitating social distancing.
Right.
So again, it's so obvious for a policymaker to get up there on these social issues and say, look, we need these things. They're going to be extremely helpful for these issues. Let's get going. I do not understand why there is no champion for this mode. It is just
absolutely. And plus, in a pandemic, we can do our stuff like we're doing it. If you're blue collar and you have to dig a ditch, You have to go where the it needs to be dug. Guess what? You need mobility to get there. Does New Jersey Transit go to the places where ditches are being dug? No. I mean, are you kidding? Absolutely, Cliff. We need to say that very strongly.
And
Well, we want to talk more about the infrastructure.
I hope, let me make the request again. Get some member of Congress or someone from DOT, get him on your podcast, and let's get this out there with this discussion. I really would like to know their responses, to these concerns.
We will continue to make that effort, and we're going to come back to the infrastructure bill in a couple minutes too. But let's talk a little bit about the responsibility of the car makers here who are building all of this great equipment, safety equipment, whether you call it autopilot, whatever you want to call it, building this into the vehicle. And some of this with this particular accident outside of Houston doesn't seem to make sense.
Crash. It's not an accident.
Well, some of it, what we've heard about it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because if there was nobody in the driver's seat, and if it wasn't on autopilot or have full self-driving, how could this vehicle be moving? So the pieces don't fit together from what we know so far.
Yeah, but Fred, I think those questions, are irrelevant here. Okay. And the reason why they're irrelevant is, I guess, one of the things that I've been on, the soapbox I've been on lately, is when we talk about crashes. The 90-some% of crashes that involve humans in there are because of human misbehavior. And I've decided to term it misbehavior because it is misbehavior. It's either, we do this, or we grab our phones, or we tailgate, or we are angry, or who knows what, pick our noses, butts, whatever, things that we do, as well as, we want to show off or something. Like, who knows what causes. I mean, these guys, one is a doctor. They're like, they're old people like us, Cliff. I mean, and Fred. I mean, what the hell was, I mean, I hope that alcohol was involved in some sense, or whatever.
Alan, Fred does raise a point, though. I mean, this is similar to the Boeing 737 MAX, in that the manufacturer does have a responsibility to ensure that users do understand how to use the technology, are using it safely. Now, obviously, an airplane is seemingly more complicated than an automobile.
Maybe not. I don't know. I mean, not running over children on Cleveland Lane is maybe more complicated than. But go ahead. Keep going.
That it's in both cases. The pilots involved in the crashes of 737 Maxes allegedly, did not respond properly to the warnings that they were receiving as to what the problems were. Now, I don't know if these guys received any warnings. Musk is obviously trying to cover himself and saying, something wasn't on, all that. But I think, it is clearly a warning for all people involved here that they do have a responsibility, especially with a new technology, to make very significant efforts that people understand what they're doing.
And then to me, that's really where, continuing to go down the line you're going, where the corporate responsibility is required. There needs to be leadership up there, not only promoting it as something that really improves the comfort, convenience, and safety of the vehicle, but also to say, look, there are limits to this. Cool it. Don't go out there and be a crazy with it. Don't go out there and give me visions that this car is like it can go out there and whatever if it has so and so, but I only have the version that's whatever, but I expand that to in my own mind. And I think that's where Musk has sort of gone too far. Thank you for taking us as far as you've taken us, but don't give us all these visions that all of a sudden this thing, I call it stupid summon. I called it stupid summon from the day it came out. Why? Because all of a sudden I can now have my car go park itself from outside. Then given that, what am I going to think? Oh my goodness, I can do more. I can let it cross the street. I can take it to Costco. I can go to Cliff's house and deliver, my whatever that I want to give you. And it can't.
Right.
And
I
what
think,
he has not done is emphasize, look, take advantage of the greatness, but cool it.
I think
Don't
that
think it's going to
people
go.
need also vision again about the technology. This is a new technology. We're still learning its strengths and weaknesses. If you have the blind vision that, okay, this thing is ready to go, right? You will never be ready for things that we can't imagine now, where we're going to have
Right.
problems with AVs. And people are already raising the concern, well, what happens if it has a choice of hitting a person or hitting a tree, all this kind of stuff.
Don't go there. Don't go there. That's too
But
weird.
the point
Okay.
being
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
there's learning. That's the idea. Is that with
Absolutely.
new technology, you need to learn about its capabilities, and you have to really go slowly and touch the waters as you're introducing it to make sure you don't make obvious mistakes. And there are going to be mistakes. I mean, it's ridiculous to think there won't be. It's the same way you introduce aircraft. You're going to learn that there are particular sources of crashes that in the future you will definitely need to be ready for. It's the same thing with an AV, and they should approach it that way.
You have to be a little humble with your vision, okay? Yes, you can do great things. Let's capture those benefits, and let's not get ahead of ourselves here. And I think unfortunately, I get ahead of myself all the time, and I run into the same problem. But you really need to, I want to even go back a little bit. Why was the automated emergency braking system not keeping that car from hitting a tree?
Right.
Okay. Forget about full self-driving. Forget about autopilot. These cars are supposed to have, and I'm sure that Tesla has, an automated emergency braking system. I would hope that automated emergency braking system would keep a car from hitting a tree.
Or at least make an effort. We don't
or at least make an effort or something, or there's data in that law that he has that all of a sudden the automated emergency braking system, and there's some line of code someplace in all of his stuff that says, hey, when the automated emergency braking system starts going nuts, turn off autopilot. So autopilot's turned off so that I can tell the world that autopilot was turned off when it hit the tree. Never mind if that's the reason, so that it doesn't get confused and not concentrate on don't hit the tree.
Now, let me
that happen here? Did that happen here? I want to know. I don't think anybody's asked that question. Yeah.
What strikes me about Tesla and this event, and I think what I'm saying is probably going to be true, is the silence of other people in this industry. I would like to hear some leadership from other CEOs. Now, I don't know any of these people. You probably do. What's going on with the culture? I mean, it could.
Well, yeah. We had John Rich here on the summit with, from Ford Argo, and he was not really kind towards Tesla with respect to them, just going a little bit too far and overreaching. And certainly Chris Urmson's been out there saying stuff. Saying basically, Tesla, I think it's before this crash that Tesla's full self-driving is where he was in 2010, when he was at Waymo 1 year in, and type of thing. And so there, look, the real shame here is that two shames. One is that Tesla has all the data to make us to really learn from these things and let everybody know. But the problem is they're keeping all the data internally, and they're only giving their view of it. So of course, some of us are so cynical that say, "Hey, they're fudging it." Which is unfortunate because, in fact, the data probably shows that these systems are really good and really do provide a lot of benefit. And it's great that he's put them out there and made them available in the marketplace. But there's not an independent entity looking at that. The other piece is that my goodness, we still need improvement. And I've argued vehemently that safety these companies should not compete on safety. They should cooperate for the very statement that you made in the opening here. Okay, these are externalities. Okay, that in fact, if they're not all safe, none will be safe in a sense, right? At least on the perception of the public and in fact, consumers, and that's the only way they're going to go anywhere. And they've not made the information available, and they've not even I'll go back to the Jonathan Brown case. What is that? That's a Tesla hitting a stationary object and the automated emergency braking system not coming on. And here we are for whatever years later, still we have automated emergency braking systems on Tesla and probably every other car, that if there's a stationary object ahead, which is the same problem that Uber had it in Arizona, the code in there says forget about it. And it goes and hits it if it can't pass underneath it. And most of the objects that when one goes down the road, what does one see? Object after object after object that's stationary in the road ahead. But luckily we pass underneath all of them. There are overpasses, there are trees, there are traffic lights, there are and these things, they can't really measure whatever, and to avoid the false alarm, they disregard them. I think nobody's ever. And
what I was raising about the other people is, it is important for industry to have elder statespeople and have credibility with the public and the policy world.
That's what we should be, right, Cliff? We're certainly elder. I don't know about statesmen, but we're elder.
We're in the academic world. We're worse than journalists.
Oh, geez. Oh, boy.
Right. So, but I think this is important really for the evolution of any industry. And you can look back at the non-autonomous world. Lee Iacocca, tried to take that position, and he was a pretty good salesman. Let's face it. He was a good advocate, certainly for Chrysler, and arguably, maybe for the industry. And certainly, I think the industry did try to get these kinds of people. And I think that's what the autonomous vehicle industry, and it may not come from the auto people, it could be from the technology people, need to do. And I don't mean just being critics of Musk, but being champions for the technology, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
You point out, look, we are concerned about these safety issues. We're going to take these constructive measures and be credible with the public. That's the problem. Be credible with the public, and we need someone like that to emerge at some point. I think that would be helpful.
Well, maybe that could be Bill Ford's role. I mean, Bill Ford's class of '79 at Princeton, and his son is a class of 14 or something like that. Whatever, he could. I don't know. Fred, maybe we should reach out to Bill Ford and see, because I think he's been a champion of this technology, and certainly the investment in Ford Argo and all that stuff and whatever and so on. And I think trying to address it properly. Mary could also be, because look at what the beauty of the Cadillac system is that it put, right from the beginning, it put in eye trackers to try to make sure that you don't misbehave, because the fine print tells you to continue to pay attention. And so they make sure as best they can that you continue to pay attention. Now, maybe, Elon thinks that because he has sensors in the seat and so on, and all the excuses that are coming out that full self-driving wasn't in the car, that autopilot may not have been turned on. That's fine. but it doesn't change the perception that the person may have had in that car to think, oh yes, it is turned on, it can do this, I'm going to hop in the back, whatever, who knows. But then his final line of defense is the automated emergency braking system that should keep that car from hitting a tree. It was in a 25-mile-an-hour neighborhood. How fast could it have been going? I mean, I don't know. Why did it hit a tree?
You brought up similar issues with the Tiger Woods crash.
I brought out similar issues with the Tiger Woods crash. I brought out similar issues, unfortunately, years ago, maybe in one of my very earliest electronic newsletters on Tesla. We had a crash in Princeton that killed the rabbi for the Center of Jewish Life in Princeton. And what happened in that was a kid was driving a BMW and probably may have tried to commit suicide. And in a road that's similar to where this crash happened, and tried to do that by ramming a parked car, in that local street, and that car that he hit then went and hit another car that the rabbi was trying to get in and killed him. I mean, the freakiest crash that you could think of. And I recall writing in that situation, why didn't BMW have in that vehicle an automated emergency braking system that would prevent the vehicle from hitting that first parked car? I mean, that's what automated emergency braking systems are supposed to do. I think where NHTSA is in all this, I have no idea. But, I mean, the
issue that you brought up, Alan, is the ability of these vehicles with the technology they have to fully take control away from an irresponsible or incapacitated driver, fully take the control away and prevent a crash.
Absolutely. I in 2014, when Mercedes came out with the Stronic Plus, I ran to the dealership and I bought one. Okay. Why? Because it supposedly had automated emergency braking that, and if it's 1.6 seconds or something like that to collision, all of a sudden, it tightens the seatbelt, closes the windows, puts down things so that the engine doesn't, take out my feet, and slams on the brakes and keeps me from hitting something.
So, Alan, that raises an interesting question. I'm, as the economist that you have me on here.
Yeah, no, sure.
I do have to raise the economics. I mean,
sure.
There was obviously the response: is this something people are willing to pay for? Because these are not put on for free. If BMW puts in automatic braking, that's going to cost more, and the people have to be willing to pay for that. And then there becomes the question: do we really think that markets respond appropriately to people's willingness to pay for safety? That obviously that's a whole show for you and I to talk about.
Yeah, but wait. The industry apparently came out and said by 2021, all the cars are going to have this, and it's going to be standard equipment, just
sure.
like electronic stability control. That
right.
If I go around a curve too fast, that sucker basically takes the steering wheel and brakes and pedal, I think, out of my hands and says, "Oh, Alan, I'm going to keep you from losing your rear end. Thank you."
But you're illustrating that how market forces do work. In other words, you will first have a technology that's introduced, and people have to warm up to it, and you're not going to have everybody wanting to pay for it. And some cars say, okay, we have a particular clientele, we put it on, people are willing to pay for it, but these may be high-end cars, and so they have a higher value of life, and they'll pay. But it's going to take a while for it to reach the whole entire industry level and get all people,
of course,
on there. So I think we have that. But the point you're raising is, look, the selling point of AVs is safety. How could you be driving around with a AV that doesn't even have safety standards that non-AVs have?
Right, and which was, if you look at the Alain Herzberg crash, with Uber out there trying to get their AV to work, they had turned off the automated emergency braking system. It saw her 6 seconds before it hit her.
Yeah.
Okay, but that thing now. Come on, guys. I would have hoped after that crash, everybody would have gone back in their code, got all their code writers to go, we got to make this sucker work. And if you look at what IIHS has done and so on, more than just the Subaru stops and doesn't hit things, some of the other systems also work and so on. But this question of the automated emergency braking system has been a question with respect to Teslas for now a while. And darn it, they haven't fixed it yet. They can do over-the-air updating better than we can do it to Mars with the little helicopter that we just did over-the-air updating of its code so it would work. Anyway.
Another launch tonight, by the way.
Yeah.
We'll be back with more, but first, this is a good time to remind you about our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. To get more info, head to motoetf.com. On the website, look for the white paper. It's called The Smart Transportation Revolution. It's under the Insights and News tab. Some great information there to help you make informed decisions. You may know that ETFs can be a smart way to spread risk with investments and focus on a particular category of stocks. The site, once again, is motoetf.com. We are back with more of the Smart Driving Cars podcast, and both the NTSB and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration are investigating this Tesla accident. And they are asking, from what I understand, Tesla to turn over all of the data. Might that be really a big moment here that if they make that public at all, Alain?
Well, I would hope they would make it public. I would hope if they don't, some court is going to do that. And I can't imagine that Tesla is out there, somehow altering that, because as we know, the cover up is worse than the crime, don't we? Didn't we learn that in Watergate or something like that? If they haven't learned that lesson, they need to go. I don't know. So it's going to come out. Okay. It's going to come out, and we'll learn a lot, and let's learn from this thing. I also, they've done a lot of good things. The autopilot.
Musk likes to talk about the numbers of lives that his technology.
Yeah, and again, I've offered to analyze the data for free for that. They need an independent. Maybe Cliff can do it. I can do it. You can do it. Somebody independent. They should just open up their data stuff. Independent, don't let out any privacy stuff and so on and so forth. Do an independent evaluation of that. I could never understand why he hasn't done it, because it must be safe. It's got to be better. It's got to be safer. I just can't imagine. Yes, there are a few people who are going to misbehave. Okay. But the preponderance of Tesla owners, they're like, they're probably scared to death when they turn this thing on. I know that whenever I turn on my stuff on my car, I'm sitting there paying attention. I don't know when it's not going to steer or it's not going to do stuff right. And so, it's got to be better, because every once in a while, when we're paying attention, we are fantastic drivers, all of us. Our problem is that we're human, or at least I'm too human or whatever. And we go off the rails a little bit. I'm sorry, and that's when we get ourselves into trouble. And the where this technology it doesn't need to be better than us when we're paying attention. It just has to do that all the time, because we don't pay attention all the time. And you just keep that constant instead of, losing it. That's how you get the safety, I think. And it delivers that for the most part until we all of a sudden decide, oh my goodness, we can play games. And then, whew,
I don't want this to be overanalyzed to the point where we start assessing autonomous vehicles based on this experience. That's the danger.
that's the danger.
We go over to the other side. This is still effectively a non-autonomous vehicle, and the people were not using it properly as an
Right. And they deserve the blame.
They go too far as to where we sort of go and make sure that AVs are not going to be picking up again more bad press. Again, the federal government still has a role. If they could step in and say, okay, look, this is the motivation we needed. Here now are going to be the safety guidelines that we use. No, Elon Musk, you cannot introduce yet the autonomous feature on your vehicle. Not yet. We are now going to lay out what the standards are for AVs, and we don't want people running around with these things in AV mode. Not yet. And they've got to do it. And I still don't even know why they won't act.
Or you can run around in AV mode as long as you're paying attention. But as soon as you stop paying attention, just like Cadillac tries to do with their system and so on, it puts on the flashers, it pulls over to the side, it stops in the middle of the road, and it doesn't let you use it again until you have a note from your mother, I mean, or whatever.
But guidelines. I'm not claiming that I know exactly when they ought to be done. That's something to decide. But it's got to be decided. I do not know even why at this point the industry doesn't push it and say, and call up, whoever at NHTSA and Mayor P and say, look, once and for all, let us lay out the guidelines for how these things should be used and tested, and to the extent they're available, driven. Let's get it done to avoid something like this.
The attempt has been made. The concept of an operational design domain, in other words, the definition of when and where this stuff works and doesn't work, has been part of supposedly the design of this. It just hasn't been up front. Elon doesn't really say what that operational design domain is. A smart someone or stupid someone, what I call it, is supposed to be used only on your own property. Okay, but does it really go out there?
I'm saying the federal government actually does have a role.
Yes.
I'm not an advocate of government intervention on many things, but this is something that is their responsibility ultimately to lay out the safety standards of all cars, not autonomous and autonomous. And they just have not done it for AVs. And if there was motivation for them acting now, this is it. This is totally predictable. And I just, really, it's so simple. Why is nobody doing anything about this?
Well, Cliff, you've written about this, that there's the big push in the infrastructure bill for electric vehicles, the incentives that are probably coming, et cetera, are continuing. But there's nothing about AVs.
Absolutely not. I mean, it is really incredible. I mean, Biden makes the point, China's eating our lunch on EVs, right? What about AVs? I mean, he doesn't even seem to be aware that China, I think they're complete now, have their autonomous vehicle only road that is going to be used to help expedite adoption of AVs in Beijing. But we're doing nothing. And EVs are important. I agree with that. But also, we do know that EVs and AVs are going to be combined. That is the ultimate vehicle that we will have. And again, there's no leadership on that front. And of course, in the infrastructure bill, I don't see any items for AVs at all. I see more for transit. You made the point about transit. I mean, I must say they have the best promoters of any mode in the world. Transit gets money and gets attention, and they have less use than telecommuting.
Okay, you know why that is? It's because the people that are selling the gizmos, the people that are selling the stuff in transit, the only buyer is the federal government. And so therefore, they're there. The people that have been developing AVs have looked to us, the consumer, the public, as being their marketplace. And in fact, have realized, in some sense, luckily, that the government doesn't have enough money to develop this thing in the first place. And two, they want to and they think there's a real private economic drive for this, that in fact, they really just want Washington to stay the heck out. So there's been no lobbyists down there, not compared to what's in there again for the 1% of the trips that transit serves. I mean, it's like, are you joking?
But
Alan, you make a point, and maybe you've talked about this in other podcasts. This may suggest that the real progress in getting AV adoption is going to go through the trucks, because the trucks, will offer the government autonomous mail delivery and obviously other kinds of shipments, and
Amazon Amazon to live up to why you use why I use Amazon. Free shipping, I mean, because it makes it almost free. Go ahead, keep going.
No, I think so in terms of all other benefits, safety, automation, and these are things the government can be a consumer of extensively.
Absolutely. So, of course they can.
I think that may be politically the route to expediting adoption of AVs is on the trucking side. And they seem to, obviously they're out there and testing and have some good support.
Yeah, but they have nobody on.
That may be the way we're going to eventually get some progress.
Right, but they have nobody on K Street.
Yeah.
Okay. There's no lobbyists, down there in Washington say, and maybe it's up to us to try again, a modal administration, a thrust, a czar, a whatever you want to call it is, or somebody that sits there now. There is a new head of the R&D end of DOT, and Robert Hampshire, and Robert Hampshire is, he's one of us. I mean, he could easily be made the Washington czar of this because he certainly has the intellect and the so on to do it, and but they need somebody like that, and maybe it'll come out of this. Look, we have an FAA that's been promoting airlines and trying to keep them, on the straight and narrow to serve that consumer area, and this one definitely needs it. I do want to make one other note, of something that was good that's come out with respect to the crash on Saturday. At least we've had the fire department go in there and say it wasn't a 4-hour fire. And in fact, the fire went so on, and the discussions that, because the implications of the fire on the evolution of electric vehicles could also be, a 3 Mile Island type or Chernobyl type thing that all of a sudden makes people afraid of EVs. Yes, we have a challenge with respect to fires, with respect to batteries. But my goodness, we've had that with respect to the gas tank that we've had in cars for 100+ years. And, the data does show that, in fact, it's not as bad as cars. So, don't all of a sudden say, hey, EVs are not only is this crash bad for AVs, it's bad for EVs. We don't want to put it in that context. Anyway, comments on that, Cliff?
Totally agreed. I mean, EVs obviously are proceeding independently, but ultimately they are going to be combined with AVs.
And there is an education process too for firefighters to know how to combat these battery fires. That's different, obviously.
Yeah, and they've learned, and as was pointed out, as is coming out with the police chief and so on, the other information that look, it was over-reported in the first place. Everybody's trying to put out the correct information, and I hope now the correct information comes out here. In a sense, what we may very well need is not just improvements in autopilot or whatever the other thing Musk calls it. We need to get this automated emergency braking system thing to work, and to work as well as the electronic stability control systems that have been mandated in all cars since 2012. And since it was mandated now more than 10 or almost 10 years ago, they're essentially on, I don't know, 80% of the fleet now that's out there, because they were out there before and then mandated and so on. So, we need to learn from this and make everything better, and to have leadership. Go ahead.
Back to the other mode, sort of why AVs really require a multimodal perspective from the policy community. I was on a podcast like this for railroads, and a lot of people are going on about the STV and protecting captive shippers and that sort of old debate. And I said, look, this is just a very provincial view of this industry, because it is very possible in 30 years you're going to be regulating over a graveyard. And what I meant by that is that trucks are already formidable enough competitors for rail. They become autonomous, they'll be even more. They'll get the advantage, obviously, in labor costs. They're going to benefit more for that from railroads. It is not inconceivable, then think 30 years from now, that trucks will say, look, we want autonomous only truck roads. And not only that, we're not going to have 2 trailers. We're not going to have 3. We're going to hook them all up. And we're basically going to offer the same kind of capacity that railroads can. What do you really need railroads for?
Well, they become railroads without the spikes.
I'm not saying this will happen, but I'm just outlining a possibility where there's real serious question about the viability of rail transportation. Now, it's much more intuitive, I think, and you probably discussed this in other meetings about transit. Obviously, AVs come along, and an industry that is continuing to lose money and bigger and bigger subsidies is going to be totally wiped out. My point is that AVs have implications for all the other modes, and their performance and their future and viability. And it really is important for the other modes to start thinking about how they could possibly interact with AVs to be more efficient and at least have some role in the system, and so on and so forth. So it also is, again, important to have a broader multimodal perspective about how autonomous is going to change all of transportation.
Absolutely, Cliff. Absolutely, Cliff. Both modes. Okay. For transit, why aren't they embracing this? Because in fact, if you have driverless mobility that you put out there, okay, with these driverless vehicles, you are transit. What is transit?
Right.
It's a mobility provider. These things are mobility providers. It will allow them to go 10x. Instead of 1% of the trips, serve 10, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50% of the trips. This is a growth. Nobody's embraced them. Essentially, oh, well, I'm going to put it on my bus rapid transit thing. Forget about it. Okay. People are going from everywhere to everywhere all the time to today. You don't have a chance to put 50 of them in a vehicle. If you did, you would have done it. But they're all, and you can't do that because you can't afford it, because you can't afford to pay for a union driver to be in each one of those things. So just buy a little gizmo to put on top of it, and it happens. And all of a sudden your market share goes up. You employ even more people. There are more union workers and blah and everything. And it makes you relevant. They have it. Railroads, same thing. Oh, we have positive train control. Get out of here. 50 years ago, we bought out 3 of the jobs of the 5 jobs in trains and took it from 5-person crews to 2-person crews. We should buy out the last 2. Okay. Why aren't railroads autonomous? I mean, they don't have to steer. They really have fence on most of the places where they don't even have to watch out for children. Okay. And if now you have railroads who have, I mean, no labor cost on the movement of a train, now you can run, instead of 200-car coal trains, which you're not going to run downhill. I mean, what a business. You run coal trains downhill. I mean, it was a great business, but you're not going to do that, as you point out, in the future. Now you can have maybe just 3-car trains, but they go from everywhere to everywhere because the stuff needs to go from everywhere to everywhere. You don't have to wait to get 200 cars that you lumber on down every who knows what. And all of a sudden, I can't believe Burlington Northern's not doing it.
With this theme that, autonomous vehicles now, I think, are not only exposing, the gross inefficiencies we have with the existing modes, but also now, and this again is not accounted for in the infrastructure bill, they're exposing the limitations of the infrastructure itself.
Yeah.
So the two problems that I mentioned, let me briefly mention these, and we can discuss them, is certainly the inadequacy of infrastructure policy. The lack of efficient pricing is obviously harmful in all respects for non-autonomous cars, and certainly something that's going to potentially limit the efficiency of autonomous vehicles, especially with trucks, because potholes are going to give autonomous cars problems. And if we had any kind of sensible pricing of pavement with axle weight prices, that obviously could reduce damage to the road. And also the design of the roads. Yeah. Once you start having autonomous vehicles, you don't need these, fewer, wider lanes. You can have more lanes that'll increase capacity, and they'll be narrower. So again, these are things that autonomous vehicles will expose how the infrastructure could be improved, right? And again, this is just not anything that seems to be part of government thinking. It's all very balkanized, and it features what I call status quo bias. That is basically the fundamental problem with so much of policy, certainly in transportation. This is how we did it, and this is how we're going to continue to do it. And AVs are that challenge. In many ways, they really are as much of an exposure to the limitations of government policy as COVID-19 was, into exposing all the weaknesses of government responses. And people really need to realize that, you have a shock, an innovation, whatever, and government is just not prepared for it. But it needs to be, because it's coming.
Yeah, and you make a very good point there, Cliff, in saying that, look, with respect to COVID, this was something that government had no control over, and it came in upon the population and whatever. In some sense, AVs are the same way. The investment community picked up on this and has put enormous money on the table. And the government
worldwide,
has
by the way,
worldwide. I mean, I don't know if it's because Adam Jonas, whatever years ago said this is a $10 trillion industry, just moving things, and therefore, and you can move them essentially, with bits and computers, and all of a sudden get entities that are going to be valued more than Toyota, and in some sense, Tesla proved that, and without even going all the way to AVs, and in some sense, the fundamental economy of the world is seeing that this piece of the economy, this sector, this 15% or whatever mobility happens to be in the whole global economy, all of a sudden can be transformed. Because you're basically taking a labor component that is a variable cost on that sucker, and you're reducing it, and doing a lot better, and as good a job as that ship that froze up the the Suez Canal in terms of, labor
It should have
component.
been autonomous, and we will have autonomous.
It may have been, I don't know.
We will have autonomous ships.
Probably would have been better if it was autonomous, because somebody there didn't take appropriate account of the wind and so on. But we would write that in our code. Trust me, my students would put that in the code. Okay. But anyway, whatever. Yeah. I mean, and this is a major part of the global economy for which the investment sector has said, my goodness, this is big.
That's as good a note as any to end this on, I think, Alan. And we really want to thank Cliff for joining in today. Cliff, terrific. Is there a place people can go to get more info on the work that you're doing?
Brookings, it's just my name in Brookings. We'll do
Terrific. Thank you so much. I mean, great insight.
Yeah, and Cliff, we've got to. Yeah, Cliff, let's reach out. Let's see if anybody wants to come on with us or something. I haven't.
He went to Princeton.
No. He was in our department. He got a PhD from my department. I know. I love him dearly. I haven't wanted to reach out to him because I don't want to put him in a corner. Okay, I don't want to put anybody in the corner. Huh?
Get Mayor Pete on.
Yeah, no, but
Secretary Pete now.
Secretary.
Yeah, no, I guess I'm waiting for them to call us instead of. But maybe we can we can find a way to do this so that I want to do it as you want to do it. We want to do it in a constructive way.
Sure, no, it's
okay.
Policy.
It's a policy. It's a discussion. Okay. Yes. I don't want us to get ahead of ourselves, but I think I
have a good idea.
Yeah. Okay.
C.C. Rouse is from your university.
Right.
She's chair of Council of Economic Advisors.
Right.
The AVs are of huge importance to the economic community and obviously should be of interest to the CEA. It would be good to actually start maybe with CC and maybe someone from DOT, and then, some independent people. I would obviously volunteer myself. And in a sense, CC could sort of moderate as to try to see, what are the really ways to sort of move forward to help a broad range of economic and social issues that she is concerned with.
Yeah, and that's a very good suggestion because my personal interest in autonomous taxis and driverless mobility and increasing transit, so on, is really, seriously focused on those that have been left behind by the automobile. Okay, because if transit could serve them, they would be serving them. The reason they're not served is, darn it, it's with conventional stuff where you have to have a driver in there. It is expensive for every trip because the person needs to go home and feed his or her family, send their kid to Princeton and so on and whatever. That's expensive. Whereas a computer doesn't feed anybody. It doesn't have a kid to send to Princeton. And in fact, with scale, you can actually see at least I can see the cost goes to zero. Okay. Or very, very attractive. But we have work to do. It has to be good. We can't oversell it. We have to be careful where we put it, and we have to do it carefully. So let's do it. And then it really helps as we began this thing with a lot of the fundamental, it's now a social issue, a social problem. This business of, saying we're going to mobility of the economically challenged folks is, get them a jalopy or get them a car. But if they can't afford to maintain the brake light so that they have a broken tail light, all that just gets ugly too easily. And there might be simple ways for us to do this, to bring all this together. So I think both economically and socially. Both are fundamentally important. And also, if we share the vehicles a little bit, it gets us a little bit better together coming out of COVID instead of being, all hood. Anyway, I don't know. Those are, to me, are the real great opportunities with all this, and we should try to make it happen.
Well, we want to take a minute to thank our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF. The ticker symbol for the ETF is MOTO, and more information is available at motoetf.com. You can find us once again at smartdrivingcar.com, also on Anchor FM, Spotify, TuneIn, Apple, Google, Spreaker, SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also ask your smart speaker to play us. You can find my tech reports at textination.com. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with Alain Kornhauser. Thank you for listening or watching, and please continue to stay safe.
Cliff, thank you very much. This was fun, and hey, we have work to do.